Warren Sharp here. Let's talk Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts. Big time deal. Who was a winner? Let's go through it. First of all, they give up Carson Wentz. In return, the Philadelphia Eagles get number 85 overall, plus the possibility of either a first round or second round draft pick in the 2022 NFL draft, depending on how much Carson Wentz ends up playing this upcoming season. I don't care how you slice it. That is a W for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles needed to move on from Carson Wentz. He was completely unhappy. They had no clue how to fix him. Their new head coach that they got, Nick Sirianni, who's going to be starting this season, did not need to be dealing with all the pressure and the relationship issues and the stresses that were going on there internally in that building because Carson Wentz was there. And I think moving on from him with the possibility of getting a first-round pick in return, if not the number 2 next year and a number 3 this year, is a great benefit for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they definitely walk away with a W and can smile at the end of the day. Now, they do have to eat this cap hit, which is $33.8 million in dead cap, the largest ever for a team in NFL history. But there's something to be said with pulling that Band-Aid right off and starting to think about the future without Wentz. But before we get into the ramifications for the Colts, was it smart, even in the first place, for the Eagles to trade for Carson Wentz? They traded up to number 2 overall with the Cleveland Browns back in 2016 to get Carson Wentz. Was that smart? The answer is simple. Yes, absolutely. They walk away a clear-cut winner. Why? Because without Carson Wentz, the Philadelphia Eagles do not win the 2017 Super Bowl. It's very simple. I know the city of Philadelphia loves Nick Foles. We'll talk about him at the end again, but look at your situation. Number one, Carson Wentz takes this team to an 11-2 record through week 14. That's far and away number 1 in the NFC. It's tied for the best record overall in the NFL. Virtually assures this Eagles team of getting the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. Why is that important? Because they have one less playoff game. In addition, they get the first round bye and they get to host 2 games at home. So they only play 2 games before the Super Bowl. They win both those games, obviously get to the Super Bowl. Nick Foles is the one winning those games, no doubt about it. But look at what else Carson Wentz allowed this team to do. It's not just his performance, it's his contract. His contract in 2017 was only $6 million in terms of a cap hit. That is nothing. That is peanuts, even in 2017. And what that allowed them to do is go after free agents very aggressively and add impact free agents. You know who they added? Guess who? Nick Foles. That's right. Nick Foles came on in 2017 as a free agent because Carson Wentz's contract was so cheap. And without Nick Foles, they absolutely don't win that Super Bowl. Secondly, look at the impact players they added on offense. We're talking about their number 1 and number 3 wide receivers, Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. Massive, massive contributors. They added both those guys. They also added their number 1 and number 2 running backs in terms of LeGarrette Blount, and during the season were able to trade for Jay Ajayi. Now, LeGarrette Blount led this team in rushing. Jay Ajayi was number 2. They don't get either of those guys without Carson Wentz's rookie deal contract cap hit of only $6 million. On the defensive side of the football, they added the player who led the team in interceptions. They also added the player in Chris Long, who was number 3 in sacks. We're talking about game-changing difference makers on the defensive side of football that they were able to add in free agency in 2017 because Carson Wentz's deal was cheap. So when you combine the play with the contract, they don't win that Super Bowl without him. I don't care what else happens. Massive win for Philadelphia to pursue him. Then just look at what the Cleveland Browns ended up doing with those picks. I mean, I went through it on Twitter. You can look, they got 5 picks back from Philadelphia. 2 were first rounders. They ended up trading every single one of those picks to get more picks. And in doing so, ended up drafting a whole lot of hot garbage with one exception, and that was Denzel Ward. So for the Philadelphia Eagles to be able to win a Super Bowl with this trade was huge. Everything else doesn't even matter. They came out a winner in the 2016 trade to get Carson Wentz. They also come out a winner in the 2021 trade to get rid of Carson Wentz. However, that does not mean that the Indianapolis Colts lost in this deal. There are some concerns with Carson Wentz, primarily his injuries, his age, and his performance. You know the injury history for Carson Wentz. He missed the ending of a couple of seasons due to injury in 2017, in 2018, in 2019. We're talking about ACL and LCL in 2017, misses the end of the season, misses the beginning of the 2018 season because of that. He fractures back vertebrae at the end of the 2018 season. He ends his 2019 season with a concussion in the final game, their playoff loss to the Seattle Seahawks. 2020 was the first offseason Carson Wentz entered when he wasn't rehabbing from an injury in that offseason. And so there was a lot of optimism that he might improve in 2020, but he got significantly worse in 2020. Now, there were a lot of extenuating circumstances for that: health of his receiving core, health of his offensive line, first and foremost. But the fact of the matter is, he has had a little bit of an injury history. His age obviously is a little bit higher than what you might expect. He was 24 years old when he was drafted. That's a big difference from the 21-year-old guys that are getting drafted in most recent drafts right now, especially that high up. So he was drafted at age 24. This season, he's going to be in his age 29 season. So he's not like a spring chicken. He's still got a lot of life left if Frank Reich can get the most out of him this season. If you look at Wentz's overall performance with and without Frank Reich, it's really not that different. But yes, that does include his rookie season, which brings him down because he only had 2 years with Frank Reich. And yes, that 2017 season that they won the Super Bowl, that he was in MVP contention, was his best from a QBR perspective or a touchdown rate perspective. So there's no doubt that Frank got the most out of Carson and was able to get that 11-2 record and a Super Bowl victory as a result. But the great thing about this trade for the Colts is a couple of factors. Number one, Wentz is now with a coach who has a lot of confidence in him and who wants him to be there and has won with him. Frank Reich is a great coach, knows how to get the most out of Carson Wentz, very familiar. So if Frank says, let's go get this guy, I think that speaks volumes as to what he really thinks that Carson Wentz is going to be able to do. The other thing is that the cap hits are extremely low. In 2022, Carson Wentz, this was his second year in Indianapolis, will have just a $22 million cap hit. 4 quarterbacks that year will be above $40 million already. More guys are going to renegotiate deals and have higher cap hits by that point in time. Carson Wentz is like almost half of that. So it's not that big of a deal. It's not that terrible of a contract to take on if you are the Indianapolis Colts and Chris Ballard. I think it was a very smart move to bring on this guy, and you're rolling the dice. You're hoping that he's going to be able to perform and that Frank Reich's going to get the most out of him. I will say I like the acquisition of Phillip Rivers to the Indianapolis Colts last year more than I like the acquisition of Carson Wentz this year, but I still think that it is a good move for the Indianapolis Colts to have made, and I still think that there's the potential for upside in Carson Wentz's game now that he is with the Indianapolis Colts. I also want to say, last but not least, so this was a W for the Colts. It was a W for the Eagles. It was a W for the Eagles when they first went out and acquired Carson Wentz in the 2016 NFL draft and made that trade with the Cleveland Browns. Everybody wins, right? It's rare that we could say that, but everybody really does win, in my opinion, in this situation. But the last thing I want to talk to is the Philadelphia Eagles fans who keep clamoring for Nick Foles. Let me tell you guys something. Frank Reich had the opportunity to trade for Nick Foles after the 2019 season. He decided not to do it. Instead, Nick Foles goes to the Chicago Bears. Nick Foles does not win the starting quarterback job before camp. He ends up playing, doesn't end up playing very well, ultimately gets replaced in Chicago. You know what the Chicago Bears were paying him in terms of a cap hit? It was a $6 million cap hit. That was next to nothing. The Indianapolis Colts with Frank Reich decided instead to pursue Phillip Rivers, not to go after Nick Foles. Okay, that was number one. Number two, Frank Reich has the opportunity this offseason to make just a simple trade. You know what Nick Foles' cap hit this year is? $6.6 million. You know how the Chicago Bears probably would have felt about getting rid of Nick Foles and letting him go somewhere else to the AFC team? Pretty good. They probably wouldn't have cared that much. Probably wouldn't have cost Chris Ballard very much either. And yet, Frank Reich and Chris Ballard and the Indianapolis Colts decided to give up potentially a first-round draft pick, definitely a third-round draft pick, and take on a higher cap hit for the next 2 years than what Nick Foles would have gotten. They went and made the move to get Carson Wentz, gave up more in terms of salary cap, gave up more in terms of draft capital to get Carson Wentz over Nick Foles. And that's happened twice now with Nick Foles and Frank Reich and the Indianapolis Colts. So please, Eagles fans, would you just be quiet about Nick Foles being the savior and, Nick Foles was the better quarterback? The guy who led Nick Foles to the Super Bowl, to that win, multiple times, passed up the opportunity to acquire him for very cheap on the dollar. That should speak volumes. He wanted Carson Wentz. End of story. Great win for all these teams.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.